Welcome this time to Ben's Top 11, and we live in a world where ponies have become more manly than vampires. I know you're all tired of hearing this, but I love cartoons. Up at a time where cartoons were everywhere, and I watched a lot of cartoons. There are some I love, and there are some I grew out of. However, there are also the cartoons that I remember watching, but I forgot about them. In fact, a lot of people forgot about the cartoons on this list. So, I'm going to count down the top 11 cartoons that I forgot, but I now remember again. Why top 11? Because I'm a ripoff of the Nostalgia Critic. No, I'm not. There is just one cartoon that I decided to add, so this is now a top 11 list. So, get ready for blasts from the past. Here is my top 11 underrated cartoons. Number 11, George of the Jungle. No, not that piece of crap remake that aired on Cartoon Network a few years ago. I'm talking about the original. Anyway, this show was a show that had 3 cartoons in one. There was, of course, George of the Jungle, a parody of Tarzan about a man who lives in the jungle with his wife Ursula, and his intelligent ape named Ape, and his pet dog, elephant, Shep. It follows the gang's misadventures into the jungle. Then, there was Tom Slick. This was a cartoon about a racer named Tom Slick, who was always racing in the wackiest races. Finally, my favorite of the 3 cartoons, Super Chicken, a show about an ordinary chicken who has to drink super sauce to become a superhero. What made this whole show great was it was made by J. Ward Productions, who were the creators of Rocky and Bullwinkle. As you can imagine, the show had the same brand of J. Ward humor that made Rocky and Bullwinkle so great. From pop culture references to puns to outrageous plots, this cartoon had it all. It's underrated because the show only lasted 17 episodes, and a lot of people probably haven't heard of it unless they're die-hard Rocky and Bullwinkle fans. However, it's still a hidden gem of a show that never ceases to make me laugh. Watch out for that tree! Ooh, is there a doctor in the house? Number 10, Dragon Ball GT. The one part of the Dragon Ball series that fans wish they could forget. However, as a big fan, I beg to differ. Anyway, this continues where Dragon Ball Z left off. Goku is turned into a child, and his granddaughter Pan and Trunks have to help fight evildoers that still appear out of nowhere. What I loved about this show is the sagas really didn't last as long as the ones in DBZ, not that that was a problem, making them a little more fast-paced. Also, the show didn't last long, so there wasn't a lot of room for filler, and there was something interesting happening in every episode. Also, there are key moments that I loved personally, like the Baby Saga, Super Android 17, and I thought Cell and Frieza teaming up to fight Goku was awesome. I don't understand how many Dragon Ball Z fans hate this show. I'll admit, it's nowhere near as good as DBZ or Dragon Ball, but is it really that bad? Maybe, but I still like it. So, I like Dragon Ball GT, as if people needed another reason to hate me. Number 9, Godzilla the Series. I'm just going to get this out of the way. The 1998 American Godzilla movie was terrible! If there was one good thing to come out of it, it would be this little gem from Fox Kids. Picked up right where that crappy movie ended. Nick Totopoulos and a group of people who didn't appear in the movie all team up to form a group called Heat. Survived from the end of the movie, and they adopt him as their protector. This cartoon had everything I wanted from the movie, but didn't get. Interesting characters, other monsters, Godzilla actually kicking Heine, and this show had humor that as a kid flew over my head, but as an adult, I can now get a lot of the jokes. Although the monster in this show still doesn't look like Godzilla, at least it acts like him a little better. Anyway, This show has a little cult following among Godzilla fans, but the general public has basically forgotten about this cartoon. However, it was one of my favorite Saturday morning cartoons growing up, and one of the reasons why I watch Fox Kids more than Kids WB. Number 8. The Adventures of Sonic the Hedgehog. Okay, time to make this perfectly clear. A lot of people accuse me of being a Sonic fan. Now, to tell the truth, I played some of his games, and I think they're a lot of fun, but I'm not a full-fledged fanboy. Now, onto the cartoon. This show is about Sonic and his friends Tails, and they need to keep stopping Dr. Robotnik from causing mayhem on the planet Mobius. This is one of the cartoons I watched a lot on Tuesday Disney of all places, and it was one I never got tired of. However, I didn't get a chance to fully realize something about this cartoon. It sucks! However, that's where the charm of it comes from. The animation is so choppy, the voice acting is so bad, and the jokes are so cheesy that I can't help but to love it. And who can forget those Sonic Says segments? Man, those were so delightfully annoying. It's just one of those cases of a show that's so bad it's good. Of course, that's why this show was very underrated, because it's so bad. However, watching it again, it's opened a complete new door for me to enjoy campiness, and it's basically what I like to call how not to make a cartoon. Number 7. Freakazoid. Here's a show that has a huge cult following, but other than that, a lot of people don't seem to remember it, so I consider it underrated. It's also a great example of a show that was made more for adults than it was for children. Anyway, this show was about Dexter Douglas, who one day was surfing the premature internet and is sucked into cyberspace and turns into the wacky superhero that is Freakazoid. From this point, he must battle such villains as the Lobe, Cave Guy, Gutierrez, Cobra Queen, Loghorn, and Wayland Jeepers. The appeal of this show comes from that it's a show in vein of Animaniacs. It's a parody of superhero shows that makes fun of everything from television to movies. It's a madcap show that's absolutely hilarious. It's probably the show out of the Steven Spielberg produced shows that I laughed the most at. It had some really clever jokes, like jokes you wouldn't see coming, an example being, "We interrupt this video for an important announcement. The 1998 Mercedes-Benz parked in row 2, section J of the Macy's on Santa Monica Boulevard's lights are on. If you don't want to get stranded in downtown LA, I would turn those off. We now return to this internet video already in progress." Hula girls! I crack up every time I hear that. Also, the animation was top-notch, the voice acting was phenomenal, and, like I said, it was hilarious. It's such a shame this show only lasted 25 episodes. Curse that dang Saturday morning time slot. Well, anyway, Freakazoid is an awesome underrated show that I'm glad I purchased the DVDs for. And remember folks, don't say Candlejack. Ah, crap. I've come for you. Do you take IOUs? No, I'm the boogeyman. Oh, come on. I got things to be mad at and other things to praise. Oh, you're so nice. Thank you. I wonder why he didn't sound like Jeff Bennett was voicing him. Number 6. Time Squad. Here's a hidden gem from Cartoon Network's library that made its presence known in the early 21st century. Anyway, this show was about a time travel unit made up of a brain-dead but very tough cop named Buck Tyrustle and a smart aleck robot named Larry who adopt a kid who's a history buff named Otto. Together, the three of them travel through time to ensure the past and protect our future. Here's an example of how Cartoon Network was still cranking out good shows even when the 90s ended. Being a history buff myself, I loved watching the boys getting mixed up with several historical figures. About the historical figures they were trying to help out. Not many people know about this show these days because Cartoon Network didn't air it very long and there weren't many reruns of it. So, I'm glad I was growing up to get exposed to this cartoon. It just goes to show, not everything we learn about in school might have happened in history. Makes you think, don't it? Number 5. Sheep in the Big City. Thanks to the nice people that have sent me links to episodes to Sheep in the Big City after my Cartoon Network salute, I have gotten exposed to this show. This show is about a sheep who runs away from his farm and tries to live peacefully in the big city. However, he is pursued by General Specific, Private Public, and a mad, angry scientist, and how they try to capture sheep to put into a sheep-powered ray gun. This show was a tribute to Jay Ward-esque shows, and you all know how much I love that. A lot of the show's humor came from breaking the fourth wall, poking fun of pop culture, and of course, randomness. It featured random clips like chicken arguing with pig and the ranting Swede. This was also a show aimed more at adults than children, and that's probably why it didn't last very long. Anyway, Sheep in the Big City was a lesser-known cartoon from my childhood that I wish I could revisit. If Cartoon Network's greedy cells would let me! Number 4. Timon and Pumbaa. A little unknown gem from Disney, this show followed the misadventures of my favorite characters from The Lion King. This is one of the closest times Disney came to being like a Warner Brothers cartoon. The plots were wacky, the characters were hilarious, and again, a lot of the jokes were aimed at adults. Plus, there was lots of slapstick. I love the slapstick. I remember watching this show a lot as a kid, and I really got excited when Disney started to air reruns again roughly around 5 years ago. This show was considered underrated because people didn't care about Disney shows anymore at the time it was first airing, because a lot of kids were too busy watching Fox Kids and Kids WB. So, a lot of people missed out on it, and they most likely didn't see the reruns. I'm glad I didn't miss out on it. The Lion King may not be my favorite Disney movie, but I love this show. It's the perfect example on how to make a cartoon based off a movie. Number 3. SWAT Kats, the Radical Squadron. Oh, heck yeah! One of Hanna-Barbera's lesser-known creations. This was a show about two anthropomorphic cats who live in a city called Mega Cat City. This show kicked glass! It was not the kind of show you would normally get out of Hanna-Barbera, but that's what made it so great. It was also darker than a lot of kid shows airing at that time. This show was home to some of the most awesome villains in cartoon history. Dark Cat, who's basically the cat version of Satan, the Metallicats, a guy and girl robot couple who were always insulting each other, just like real life couples. And my personal favorite, Dr. Viper, a cat who, after a lab accident, is now half snake and half cat. I could listen to Frank Welker doing that hissing voice all day. Another awesome thing about this show was the action. There were lasers and explosions all over the place. It's an action lover's dream. However, the awesomeness of this show is what led to its downfall. Parents complained about its violence, and Ted Turner ordered the show to be canceled. Such a shame. Anyway, this show is underrated because it was one of the few cartoons on TBS's Saturday morning cartoon block. Anybody remember that? And reruns only aired on Cartoon Network during the early to mid-90s. However, if you have Boomerang, you're lucky because this show appears every now and then on Boomerang's schedule. Despite its cult following, SWAT Kats is still an underrated show that if you like action cartoons, it's definitely your cup of tea. Number 2. Woody Woodpecker. By this, I'm referring to the original theatrical Woody Woodpecker cartoons. These cartoons are all about Woody and how he's a screwball that's always messing with his foes and driving them crazy. A lot of you folks might be surprised to me calling this cartoon series underrated because Woody Woodpecker is a household name. Well, that may be, but how many of you actually watched a Woody Woodpecker cartoon? That's what I thought. These cartoons aren't favorites among cartoon historians due to them being on lower levels of creativity than those of other cartoon studios. I can't disagree more. They're mostly referring to the Paul J. Smith cartoons. I'll admit, those cartoons don't have the top-notch animation that Disney had, and they don't have the strong characters that Warner Brothers had, but they were still wacky and hilarious with so many cartoony gags. However, the old Woody cartoons were actually pretty great. Those are the ones that might be able to compete with those of Disney and Warner Brothers. Those cartoons had great animation, as well as great stories. Those are the cartoons they should refer to. Bottom line, the entire Woody Woodpecker series as cartoons might vary in quality depending on the decade the cartoons you watch are from, but they are still great cartoons overall that are a heck of a lot better than a lot of the cartoons we have these days. Haters gonna hate! And my number one underrated cartoon show is... I couldn't resist. Hi Puffy AmiYumi. I know, you're sick of seeing this show on the top of my list, but that's the perfect example as to why this cartoon is underrated. Anyway, it's about Ami and Yumi, two Japanese rock stars as they travel the world and get into several misadventures. What I love about this show is the animation is bright and colorful, the characters are very lovable, and it is the only cartoon I've seen from the modern age that comes close to being like classic cartoons. The episodes were broken into 3 7-minute minisodes that allowed for short plots to be as cartoony as possible. The gags were also reminiscent of the classics, as they mostly relied on dialogue, facial expressions, and the expert timing to be funny. And what does an episode focusing on Kaz and the Kats remind you of? Does Tom and Jerry come to mind? I thought so. What also made this show unique is it features songs from the real-life Puffy that would play over montages of clips. Can you think of any other cartoon that does that? Didn't think so. This show is underrated because many consider it to be the worst Cartoon Network show ever. Until Problem Solvers came around. And then Secret Mountain Fort Awesome. But that's besides the point. That's just because people think that it's an insult to anime. Really? Really? Anyway, I didn't see anything wrong with this show, because being a fan of classic cartoons, this is exactly what I want in a cartoon. So, it's not only the number one underrated cartoon to me, it's also my favorite cartoon of all time. I'll never get tired of it, and I'll never forget this quote from this show. Anything is possible. And there is my top 11 underrated cartoons. I hope you enjoyed it, and I might have helped you discover or rediscover cartoons you remember as a kid. It's true, I can't love every cartoon that comes on, but I'll always be looking forward to any new cartoon shows I might like. And if there are some that I haven't heard of and haven't discovered yet, then I'll always be in the mood for lesser known cartoons. Anyway, I'm Ben, and I'm signing out. I'm gonna go find me some anti-Candlejack spray.